The following intro is an excerpt from the original story, The Hounds of Tindalos, by Frank Belknap Long, Jr., originally printed in 1937, Weird Tales, Volume 30. When Chalmers phoned the following morning, my first impulse was to hang up the receiver immediately. His request was so unusual, and his voice was so wildly hysterical, that I feared any further association with him would result in the impairment of my own sanity. But I could not doubt the genuineness of his misery. And when he broke down completely and I heard him sobbing over the wire, I decided to comply with his request. "Very well," I said. "I will come over immediately and bring the plaster." En route to Chalmers' home, I stopped at a hardware store and purchased 20 pounds of plaster of Paris. When I entered my friend's home, he was crouched by the window, watching the opposing wall out of eyes that were feverish with fright. When he saw me, he rose and seized the parcel containing the plaster with an avidity that amazed and horrified me. He had extruded all of the furniture, and the room presented a desolate appearance. "It is just conceivable that we can thwart them," he exclaimed. "But we must work rapidly. Frank, there's a stepladder in the hall. Bring it here immediately, and then fetch a pail of water." "What for?" I murmured. He turned sharply, and there was a flush on his face. "To mix the plaster, you fool!" he cried. "To mix the plaster that will save our bodies and souls from a contamination unmentionable. To mix the plaster that will save the world from... Frank, they must be kept out." "Who?" I murmured. "The Hounds of Tindalos," he muttered. "They can only reach us through angles. We must eliminate all angles from this room. I shall plaster up all of the corners, all of the crevices. We must make this room resemble the interior of a sphere." I knew that it would have been useless to argue with him. I fetched the stepladder, Chalmers mixed the plaster, and for 3 hours we labored. We filled in the 4 corners of the wall and the intersections of the floor and the wall and the wall and the ceiling. We rounded the sharp angles of the window seat. "I shall remain in this room until they return in time," he affirmed when our task was completed. "When they discover that the scent leads through curves, they will return. They will return ravenous and snarling and unsatisfied to the foulness that was in the beginning, before time, beyond space." He nodded graciously and lit a cigarette. "It was good of you to help," he said. "Will you not see a physician, Chalmers?" I pleaded. "Perhaps tomorrow," he murmured. "But now I must watch and wait." "Wait for what?" I urged. Chalmers smiled wanly. "I know that you think me insane," he said. "You have a shrewd but prosaic mind, and you cannot conceive of an entity that does not depend for existence on force and matter. But did it ever occur to you, my friend, that force and matter are merely the barriers to perception imposed by time and space? When one knows, as I do, that time and space are identical, and that they are both deceptive because they are merely imperfect manifestations of a higher reality, one no longer seeks in the visible world for an explanation of the mystery and terror of being." I rose and walked toward the door. "Forgive me," he cried. "I did not mean to offend you. You have a superlative intellect, but I have a superhuman one. It is only natural that I should be aware of your limitations." "Phone if you need me," I said, and descended the stairs 2 steps at a time. "I'll send my physician over at once," I muttered to myself. "He's a hopeless maniac, and heaven knows what will happen if someone doesn't take charge of him immediately."
Hey there, creatures, and welcome to Encounter This, a podcast exploration of the creatures from Pathfinder 2nd Edition and the lore that surrounds them. Hello there, creatures, and welcome to another episode of Encounter This. I am James, Angular Kid, and with me, as always, is Freeman, Curvy Iced, and that doesn't feel good. I don't like starting out.
I knew you'd hate it. Just do it.
And today we're going to be talking about the Hounds of Tindalos on Bestiary 2, page 146, if you want to follow along.
Please do. Hound of Tindalos. Cool ass creature. I don't mind saying myself. Always had this creature in the back of my head for some reason. Finally put it to use at one point. Very happy I did. It was very fun. Yeah, really interesting creature coming from the Lovecraftian Cthulhu mythos, which I'm not that I love, but I've never really read any, except for I did read the original story for this creature before this episode, but really loved it and really intrigued in it and really want to put some time into, getting into more of that mythos and the people that contributed to it. But yeah,
people other than HP. Let's be clear, we as a show do not endorse HP and a good majority of their beliefs.
Yes, certainly not the old philosophies. But I mean, I'm sure that'll kind of come up along the way here and there. But I do have another Imaginary Worlds podcast recommendation in regards to that topic, actually. But we'll come to that later. So there's let's talk about the creature. Let's start. Obviously, let's just dive right in, shall we? We don't endorse Lovecraft. Here's the game lore. Let's go.
We don't endorse Lovecraft's beliefs and practices.
They're
good. A portion of their literature we do endorse. I don't know what that portion is. I'm also not a Lovecraft aficionado. I don't think I've ever actually read any Lovecraft. But I do know they were not a good person.
Well, that's just it. There was we're actually looking at that separation of person and creator or artist, and which we find ourselves loath to do sometimes, but we ought to anyway. And that's what that podcast is about. The episode anyway. Again, we'll come to it, but let's talk about what here's this creature that comes from this mythos and is clearly inspired people to be entered into this game, like many things, whether they come from mythology or folklore or a very particular intentional creation, and that's more contemporary or what have you. And the Hound of Tindalos is really neat. It's a very different approach to a creature, and I love it. It's got like a really twisted kind of otherworldly nature, like you would expect from the Cthulhu mythos. And the first thing that is described about the Hound of Tindalos is that it is lean and athirst. When you put the picture up of it from Tui here, and we'll get a look at look at that thing. It is certainly lean. I don't know if you can visibly see a thirst, but it is kind of barely canine, despite being called a hound. If anything, I'd say it's a little more feline. But it certainly has that emaciated appearance, but it does have some canine-like features, in specifically the fact that it has this ability to sort of catch the scent of a mortal and pursue it relentlessly, and even calling other hounds, with a howl or whatever it might do to join the hunt. So definitely pack hunters in a way, but the hound part seems to be a little bit more metaphorical, I guess.
Yeah.
Rather than physical.
It just looks like a fish on a dog's body to me.
Oh, I'm glad you said fish, because we'll get to that with the artwork, actually.
Okay.
So we have basically, so they hunt down, they pursue their targets relentlessly, like I said, but their targets are something very particular. Their targets are those who have tampered with time or managed to mess up its flow at the very least. And it usually comes through someone traveling through time, through the use of magic or alchemical drugs that have the ability to send thoughts or perception forward or backward through time. And they basically hunt these targets through all space and time as needed. And as you can imagine, some powerful spellcasters would very much like to draw these creatures and bind them.
drawing them from the dimension of time itself, doing so via a ritual. But the problem is that the ritual itself tends to draw their ire. So the spellcasters, more often than not, don't succeed in even getting the ritual itself off because they're usually killed beforehand. So even the spread of the knowledge of the ritual is very severely and quickly mitigated.
That's a neat
Thoughts so far?
catch-22.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I love the artwork here because it is like lean and it is emaciated, but it doesn't look like that's holding it back. It looks like it's ready, and there's this weird smoke coming off the tip of its tail and the tip of its tongue, of all places. It looks ready to strike and hit it. So it looks wild. It looks chaotic. It looks like it's not to be reasoned with at all.
Yeah. It reminds me of an anglerfish on the body of Samael from the first Hellboy.
Okay, yeah. Okay. Of course, you get another Hellboy reference. Amazing.
I mean, Mike Mignola is just a master of the occult.
You know, looking at this creature, it looks a little bit chaotic, but it does have a sharp and cruel mind. It doesn't tend to interact with other creatures, despite the fact that it might call their hounds to the hunt. It tries not to. It really just goes out of its way to not interact with others. It basically hunts its target, it slays them, devours them, and then moves on. The only way to avoid them is to avoid obvious angles of any kind, in a very literal sort of physical sense. Because traveling through time is one thing, but the way they travel through space is different. And they have to travel through the physical angles of space.
Okay.
And they don't have much choice beyond that.
So I just want to stop you there. So what this lore, Pathfinder lore, is assuming that space and time are two different concepts and entities.
I mean, to a degree, it must. Yeah, it must be. And I think that's because magic, you know, that's my guess. Because I was thinking about this today. I was reviewing this episode. I was thinking, wow, like we now know space time are one and the same, or rather, like, you know, mutually inclusive. They can't be kind of separated, right? But there does seem to be an assumption that there's at least some part of one or the other that is capable of being separated from the other, which does kind of, they continue on in the lore with it. Between the next thing that covers is a bit of a sidebar from 2E, and we'll get into 1E lore. It doesn't really grossly explain it, but it does get a little bit more into exactly that sort of thing. So
Sounds
basically
good.
On the sidebar, there are ancient texts that refer to the creatures as Hound of Tindalos, but they never go into detail what Tindalos itself might be. And there are some that imply Tindalos is one of the great old ones or one of the outer gods, but it must be something very obscure because there's nothing known about it. There are others that suggest Tindalos is a place or location, maybe a city or nation that is from before time even began. So right there, you're kind of creating a separation already. A location, a space that existed before time even started. And basically reaching it is impossible for anyone who is bound by what they call the laws of time, which is unlike the Hound, who is not bound by the laws of time, but is bound by apparent laws of space. And then It is basically generally accepted that the most likely answer is all and none of the above, and that Tindalos is probably something that is impossible for our mortal minds to comprehend. So there's your kind of get out of jail free card for the whole concept.
Right. We stole it. We don't know what to do with it, so we're doing this.
Which is very apt for, a Lovecraftian creature or a Cthulhu Mythos creature, not to mention something from the Dark Tapestry and or occult lore in Pathfinder. It's exactly what you sort of would expect. It's very misunderstood.
Stuff is just a love letter to this Lovecraftian stuff.
Basically is, yeah, a lot of it, yeah, 100%. Goes to show you how, that him and the people who contributed to that said mythos have had such a tremendous effect for them to almost, in their own way, almost corner 1/4 of the magical traditions that we find in Pathfinder, right? The occult side of things. Obviously, not just them, but like they've got a pretty good influence on that.
Yeah. Anton LaVey and all those dudes at JPL did a pretty good job of
yeah,
reeling in the occult for us.
For sure. Then we get into 1E lore, which does offer a few extra things. I'm so glad we started covering some of the 1E stuff here and there, and getting more into it, because sometimes they just have it reminds me of the old D&D stuff we were covering. Like the ecology was so interesting from like the old school stuff from the magazines, and then 1E tends to have extra bits of detail and story added in, and especially really, in my opinion, better physical descriptions. Like you could look at the creature and know, but I love a written down physical description. Yeah, there's the 1E art. Oh, so good. Probably more horrifying, in my opinion. It looks even less canine and feline at this point, and much more alien. It's described
sapien to me.
Yeah, right. It's described as like a foul mixture of a humanoid and a sleek big cat. No fur, but flesh that is pallid and muscular. Their forearms were a lot longer, but they still walked on fours. And the arms also end in sharp flesh-shredding claws. And their faces brutally alien, with huge black soulless eyes, a wide, deep mouth filled with broken razor teeth. Like that's just, it's just a great description, and it fits that piece of art big time.
I wonder if that was written before the art or for the art, where like in 1E maybe they drew the images and then wrote the descriptions, whereas in 2E it's definitely the other way around.
Seems to be sometimes, yeah. Yeah, I wish we got a little bit more, a few more words, I suppose. But, publishing, I know they're trying to save space a lot of the time, so I'm not going to harp too hard on it. Excuse me. I'm just glad we have some of the old stuff to cross compare and add to the list.
You heard it here, folks. Just because 2E's out doesn't mean 1E's dead.
Yeah, there you go. Now, according to someone known as the Steward of Stethalos, who was a powerful oracle who guided visitors to the dimension of time, and also possessed a powerful hourglass artifact called the Glass of Stethalos. Don't really know much about it, to be honest. But according to this steward, the name Tindalos refers to a location beyond what is known as the Viridescent Jungle. The Viridescent Jungle, either the Viridescent Jungle or the Tindalos, I can't remember which one, is a place within the dimension of time where those who flow with time in one direction have no place. So there's another kind of splitting of time and space in a way. And basically only the hounds and their masters, whoever they may be, dwell there. And again, this is all according to the Steward of Stethalos. Their ability to travel within the angles of reality means they can travel incredible distances and at incredible speeds, basically plane hopping and crossing as they see fit. Their thoughts are impossibly alien, and attempts to read them cause your mind to be assaulted. And their gaze is capable of ripping through the very fabric of reality, leaving horrible wounds in their targets. These things are true even for the 2E version, but missing amongst the description, but very, very obviously present here in the 1E one. There were some variants in 1E as well. Excuse me. There was a 6-legged Mastiff of Tindalos, a variant known as the Thing from Beyond Time. And they typically served denizens of Lang. And there was apparently another 3-headed variant called a Ravager of Tindalos as well. I don't really have pictures of that, but I do have a 1E picture if you want to do the next one. And this is the iconic for the spiritualist class, named as Estra? Estra and her phantom on air. And they're battling a hound and its master in the background, whoever that master might be.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's a really sweet image, but fuck, like in my mind while you're going through that 1E lore, I'm like, this sounds like some 1990s garbage Stephen Strange storylines. And then you said the Steward of Stethalos, and I was like, oh well, Sorcerer Supreme, powerful oracle who guides visitors through dimension of time, powerful hourglass artifact, Eye of Agamotto. And then we look at
where
this
they
image,
stole this
and
from.
and then she's literally doing the Sorcerer Supreme
yeah,
hand.
she's got the thing. She's got.
So
which
in,
I'm pretty.
in the books, if I remember correctly, he does his hands like that because all of his fingers are broken and he can't really do magic. That's why it's all in the wrists.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't
so
know
that's why
that.
he had to stop being a surgeon, is because all his hands are all messed up.
Oh, crazy.
So all of Stephen Strange's magic is in the wrists, and he only does the Spider-Man hands because that's how Jack Kirby could draw hands and make it look like there were 5 fingers. Shit, you know, that is actual truth.
That's amazing.
Yeah, there's so much of that shit out there. Like, I don't know if it was, I think it was Liefeld who just like had a hard time drawing waists, so just pouches everywhere, just like fucking
really?
tactile pouches. Yeah,
Just
I just do that
hide
all the
too.
time.
Yeah, I love it. I love
Yeah.
it. That's so good. Well, we can now move on to mythology and folklore.
All right. Mythology and folklore.
We can get right into the first image if you want to. Is we have a couple of these just for fun's looksies, but just the Wikipedia page has a really unnerving picture of this creature. But the Hound of Tindalos was created by a writer named Frank Belknap Long Jr. He was an American writer of horror fiction, fantasy, science fiction, poetry, gothic romance, comic books, and nonfiction. However, most notably known for horror and sci-fi, and in particular for including many contributions to the Cthulhu mythos. He was actually a longtime friend of H.P. Lovecraft and a frequent contributor to pulp magazines, and sold his very first short story to the Old Weird Tales magazine. The Hound of Tindalos itself was actually codified into the Cthulhu mythos by someone named August Derleth, who was responsible for publishing the many stories of Lovecraft in his circle of writers and contributors, who also coined the term Cthulhu mythos. And the very first story of the Hound of Tindalos appears in a short story simply called The Hounds of Tindalos, which is published in Weird Tales in, I think it was issue 30 in 1929. And that's our thing. That's what we'll have on our reading list. It is in public domain. So that was actually the intro to this episode, was an excerpt from that story that I read word for word.
I do just want to correct you real quick. Weird Tales is not, it is old, but it's still going.
Oh, it's still going.
Yeah, I think it's been going since like 1917 or something like that. Like,
did I imply that it's
took
finished?
A brief hiatus in the aughts, but it's back.
Yeah,
or it's coming back. One of the two. Yeah,
very cool. That's awesome. Yeah, and like, I mean, Weird Tales has like a pretty cool reputation, I think, among certain circles.
It's where a lot of this Lovecraft stuff got published.
There was another mention of these hounds too by Lovecraft himself after the fact, in which he mentioned them in a short story called The Whisper in Darkness, published in 1931. Do you want to throw up the next image there and take a look at this? I love this one because it's it kind of fits the part of the tale here because it's so obscure looking. And basically the original story deals with the main character experimenting with time travel through the use of psychedelic drugs and esoteric artifacts. So you can imagine, like, this is a thing that like pops up into your mind's the image of your mind, I guess, maybe on such substances. The hounds were said in this story to inhabit the angles of time, while humankind in all common life come from the curves of time. And their name is meant to be a, quote, veil for their foulness. And though they are often depicted as canine-like, neither Frank Belknap Long nor Lovecraft ever gave them a complete physical description. Instead, they were considered to be too foul to be described. What we did kind of get out of them was that they have these long, hollow tongues or a proboscis to drain bodily fluids from their victims, and they excrete a strange blue pus or ichor of some kind. Go to the next image. So that was from the Wikipedia page. This is from the Lovecraft Wikipedia page. So you can see now you're getting more of a proboscis kind of look to them. And this is very reminiscent to some of the stuff, if I recall correctly, from Stranger Things. I don't know if you ever bothered watching it. It's been a while for myself, but it reminds me of some of the elements of like the aesthetic and stuff from that story.
Yeah, I watched a couple of seasons. It was good. This is just giving me Displacer Beast vibes with a
that too. Yeah, big time.
I want to say bifurcated jaw, but I honestly don't know if it's that or if it's just a 3-point mouth.
It's kind of like a 3-point mouth, isn't it? Yeah, it's and this long ass tongue. These these weird tendrils and tentacles coming off its back. Even its tail. At first, it doesn't look like its tail is its tail. It just looks like another tentacle coming up from somewhere.
Yeah.
Like, oh, it is coming up from the back. Kind of. It's kind of obscured, but it's
Even
pretty.
its front forelegs are like these tendrils as opposed to its back legs where they're like, this looks powerful. Except for those front legs. Those front legs kind of leave a little something to be desired. But I think that's the point.
But it also looks like you can't predict where they're going to move next because they look very noodly,
Yeah, this thing can crab walk and it wouldn't shock me.
Yeah, exactly. And it was said in these stories too that they're basically capable of materializing through any sharp angle or sharp angled corner. 120 degrees or less specifically, and it starts with a smoke pouring out of the corner, with the head followed by the body slowly emerging. And attracting the hound's attention is done through traveling through time, of course, and it will pursue its target through anything it can. So quite relentlessly. So you can see there's a lot of things that line up here with the mythology and the folklore and the 2E or Pathfinder lore. It's all pretty above board, though there's not a lot to go on. Say with the stories from Frank Belknap Long and Lovecraft, because they don't go into tremendous detail other than that sort of horror of it existing at all, which I think is kind of the mode of operation for the Cthulhu mythos, right? It's like there's a lot of like nondescript things to make your imagination really conjure up the rest.
Well, I think I'm prepared to be corrected on this because I don't know, but the Thulian monster, the thing with the tentacle beard, I don't think that thing was ever described in any of the Lovecraft stuff. We just decided at some point that that's what it looked like. I think. I'm super prepared to be corrected on that. I don't have a source. That's just something I'm vaguely remembering off the top of my head. But
yeah, I mean, it could
not
be true.
describing a creature was Lovecraft's MO. That was their whole thing to explain how terrible it was. It was an unreliable narrator. Their mind could not put to words how horrible these things were. Yeah. And that's a totally justified tactic. Like it works.
It's really cool. Honestly, the Hounds of Tindalos short story was an awesome read. I was captivated. I thought it was really cool. It really the hound is never there in the story. It is, it is about the main character seeming to have a psychotic break and assuming that they have this ability to transcend somehow through drugs and this stuff, and has called a friend in to help them do it. But the friend is super skeptical, and they're both very intelligent people, but the friend helps them through it no matter what. And then it goes into like part 2, which was my narration at the beginning of this episode. And it's like dealing with the big psychotic break after the fact, and then really like kind of trying to help them along, and then insist they find help. And and it's really crazy how they just kind of intersperse the details of what this creature is supposed to be, and what happened through this psychedelic drug ritual. It's really cool, and it's not a long read, but it's really neat. But you move to the next photo, because that's the one that's the fish. Look at that thing.
Okay.
That thing is gnarly. This is a piece of art that I found by someone named Mike Francina. And it's just so ridiculously otherworldly. I mean, how many legs and arms does that thing have? It's got a mouth coming out of a face. It's coming out of a face that's all like fishy and scaly and just like skin on bone. It's something else.
Yeah. This really is something I can't even begin to describe. It looks like the roots of a tree if it was on a dog. Like,
yeah, yeah, it is some like, messed up shit.
Yeah, like if Yggdrasil and Fenris had a child, it might look something like this.
but it's a cool piece of art. I love it. I mean, just, it would be so terrifying to have that come at you. And it's not even on the ground. It's just it's just floating through smog, you know.
Yeah, get that, but done as the Vitruvian Man. That'd be a sick backpack.
So many angles, too many angles.
What is
all of them 120 degrees or less?
What is Rafe's brother's name?
Rafe? Who's Rafe?
Joseph? Rafe Fiennes?
Oh, Rafe Fiennes? Joseph Fiennes. Yeah.
Yeah, so like Joseph Fiennes.
He says Rafe like he's his friend. Rafe, what's his bro's name?
We go way back. We go back to Enemy at the Gates. It's not a big deal.
Oh shit. But yeah, that's the lore for the Hound of Tindalos. Pretty straight up. What do you think?
Yeah, that's cool. I like it. I love this. There's this period of time between like 1919 and I don't know, somewhere in the neighborhood of 1936, where society was just like burgeoning with these interesting and beautiful ideas that have kind of like penetrated the cultural zeitgeist even 100 years later. And I'm sure a lot of it has to do with the creativity and the horror from the First World War, and then being stymied by the creativity and the horror of the Second World War.
For sure. I was thinking about that earlier. Again, when I was reviewing the episode, it's like how, you know, this topic, this is like 1929, and this topic of space and time and the distinction between the two and being able to travel through it and stuff. Like, it's not that like time travel was you know, thought up around then, but like to me it's pretty clear that, you know, was it 1905 1910 era when, you know, the theory of relativity in space-time and all that stuff was, you know, published and from Einstein. And it's really like really neat to see, like, you know, clearly, you know, these authors have been reading things like that. It's clear they're invested in science, so that sci-fi is a main part of their topics. And I'm sure around that time, I would guess around that time that that's when you're getting a big push towards things more sci-fi. You know, at that point there surely wasn't too many sci-fi stories, and this is like crossing those lines, right? Like, not compared to like what we have today, right? Like, no,
that's true. Like the original, I don't want to say the original sci-fi boom, but the big sci-fi boom is like the late 20s, early 30s with like Heinlein and Asimov and guys like that really started to get out there. And everything I've heard about Lovecraft reminds me a lot of Heinlein. I really like Heinlein's work, as I'm sure our listeners can tell. And it's because though he plays with negative space the same way I imagine Lovecraft does. It's not about what you see and what you're reading. It's about what you're not seeing and what you're not reading. And all the Heinlein short stories that I've read have just been excellent examples of that. And there's something about this time period, because this is when we get Stoker's Dracula. This is when we get Shelley's Frankenstein. This is when we get the original collected works of Byron. Like there's just so much that came out of this very, very short period in history. This is where we get moving pictures, for Christ's sakes.
Right. Yeah. But obviously there's a lot, a lot going on this time. Certainly probably more efficient travel. I don't know what the era exactly of Industrial Revolution is, but this is probably during or post, you know, and it's like,
it would have been post. Industrial Revolution was, I think, 1890 to 1914, whenever the First World War kicked off.
But clearly we're looking at like not only just like this obvious amount of like production and progress happening on a whole bunch of different levels and scales, like different industries and stuff like that, but it's probably post all that production and progression, and obviously a bunch of fear related to what that means for a lot of people, both financially and socioeconomically and that sort of thing. And, you know, and a lot of curiosity of what else is next, you know, what's moving forward. You know, we've discovered this most significant thing. What on earth are we going to discover next? Surely there's something even bigger and bolder and grander, which does actually kind of bring me to the topic a bit of the podcast episode I want to recommend. Again, it's Imaginary Worlds, which I've recommended many times. So there's an episode called Inverting Lovecraft, and it definitely covers the sort of well-known and documented sort of extravagant, rampant racism that Lovecraft held in his beliefs. But the episode is about how Black writers and creators have used his works and separated, the person from the writer, and reused it in different ways, including creating the HBO show Lovecraft Country. And there's a short story called
which has its own
novella,
set of problems. We don't endorse Lovecraft Country either.
Well, I've never watched it. I have no idea.
Oh, it's pretty good. Just Jonathan Majors is incredibly problematic.
Oh, really? Okay, sure. I don't even know who that is. So
he's the stuff.
The point being is that we have the episode talks to university professors and writers and different people's in arts and production, all from a person of color community, and talks about how utilizing that universe and sort of keeping themselves at arm's length from the creator himself, but still respecting the work and understanding it and appreciating it and moving on with it. It's a really interesting episode, and it kind of covers, if I recall correctly, it's been a while, but it always stood out. I remember it kind of covering some of sort of like trying to understand why Lovecraft had these sentiments as a particular individual, not just as a random white dude writer, like as a particular individual and within his circle of friends and his circumstances. And it really was, if I recall correctly, along the lines of this era in which there was a whole lot of, I'm not sure what's going to happen next, and I'm a bit afraid, and I'm a bit concerned that I'm going to lose what I have, and like there's this irrational idea behind that fear, and then you kind of pivot towards focusing on something that's not reasonable, not justifiable, to combat your fear with. And it really just kind of covers those social intricacies of Lovecraft, and how people of color have used that. And I think it's a really cool episode. I'm gonna go listen to it again as soon as I can now that I'm rambling on about it. But it always stood out in my head as a really neat subject piece on something that's very, very controversial and very delicate. But highly recommend. It's a really, really neat episode. It's and very, very creative. So lots of points of view in that. And it's a productive conversation, which I always love.
That's good. They always do good work over there, and we'll make sure we link them in the reading list in the show notes as well. So you've got easy access to that episode.
Hmm. But yeah, let's move on. Forget story. Well, we'll come back to some story, but let's get into mechanics. The thing.
There is one last point I wanted to touch on.
Never mind.
Before we move past this, and you were kind of getting there, and you were kind of talking about it with this idea of the unknown post the Great War. But I just want to posit a dissenting opinion as a matter of just the discussion. And I wonder, I'm curious, is if it's not the other way around. So after the Great War, there was all this infrastructure and these things that we can now reap the benefits of as a society, like railways all throughout Europe, aeroplanes, like inventions like that allow us to expand our worldview in a way that wasn't possible before. And I'm wondering if that's what created this weird, decade, 15-year long boom in creativity that's really stuck with the cultural zeitgeist, at least with me, in a way that no other era really has. So I wonder if that's casually adjacent to it.
I can't imagine it's not. Like it sounds like it very much would be. Like you just suddenly have more access to more things from different cultures and around the world. And even if those cultures are, your quote unquote first world ones, your neighborly ones in that sort of economic world, it's suddenly there's just more access in America to English stuff, and even more access from English to more European stuff, and even further across the board. Like there was plenty before, but now there's that much more. There's just so much more happening. And and it can only really happen. It can only really be new for so long. Right. And then from there, you're right. Like there is no pocket from there in which there's that big boom again. because
Yeah, it's
we
just all
already got the
facsimiles.
communication's already been formed. Like arguably, the age of the internet was the next one, but that it covered
Yeah,
too many
so-
bases at the same time, not just these
Yeah.
few obvious ones.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. All right. Speaking of the internet, let's figure out how these things work.
Okay, mechanics.
I was really hoping that was the right button. So many buttons, listeners.
That's 1,000 buttons. We have the wonderful Hound of Tindalos. Actually, we technically have 2 stat blocks. So we also have the Ravager of Tindalos, which does appear in.
Cool.
I'm going to go with that. We don't have to say it at this point. Appears in an unnamed AP, and I can tell you that it is basically just a beefed up same version of the same thing, with the exception, I think, of one extra ability, which we'll cover.
Cool.
But basically, Hound of Tindalos is a level 7 creature. AC of 25, HP of 90, medium sized. Has the traits Aberration, as you'd expect, and Time, which very few creatures have as a trait, which is pretty fun. Occultism, for your recall knowledge lore, of course, out of 28.
Right.
Unspecified specific lore going to 26 and 23. Perception is 17, pretty recent. Speed 30, fly 30.
I mean, it adds up from all that wispy smoke shit that we see in the artworks.
Yep. Look at that
one,
thing.
But that one.
Amazing. True enough. Only speaks the language of Aklo, and it has greater dark vision, which, I think just makes sense.
What is greater dark vision?
It's
What
a
is the
very good
difference between
question. The
greater
link I
and
had,
regular dark vision?
the link I had took me to the wrong spot. Okay, here it is. Monster with dark vision can see perfectly well in areas of darkness and dim light, though such vision is black and white only. Some forms of magical darkness, such as 4th level darkness spell, block normal light. A monster with greater dark vision, however, can see through even these forms of magical darkness. So
Okay,
just can't.
that's what it is.
All darkness you see through, plain and simple.
Right.
We're looking at strength of 4, dex of 6, 2 con, 6 intelligence. So not stupid. 4 wisdom and 2 charisma. Not stupid, but relentless in nature. So probably a pretty good tactician on its own, but will fight to the death, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Acrobatics is 17, athletics of 15, occultism 17. Should you want to talk to it and ask it occult questions, I guess. And so where are you from? Let me tell you all about Tindalos. Aklo, it sounds like this. Decent to stealth for a 17. A survival 13, but 17 particularly to track. So it gets an extra bonus for tracking, which stands to order. Yeah. Fortitude is a 13, reflex 17, and will 15. All adds up, I think, to its nature, and it does have resistance.
Kind of low.
What's that?
This feels kind of low.
Which one? All of them?
Well, reflex specifically for a 4-legged creature that can jump through time and or space.
Well, yeah.
But okay.
The thing is that we can't I know where you're at. We're always playing this numbers game in our heads for this game.
Yeah, and Paizo's way better at it than we ever will be.
Yeah. The numbers are probably very likely at the exact appropriate number they need to be for the level, and especially with the assumption that they have abilities beyond just a flat number to make up for something that doesn't seem quite right. So you would think that it's more, maybe even more dexterous, like she can this extra bonus to reflex, but we'll come to an ability that it has that definitely makes up for that.
Cool.
It is resistant to mental, poison, and physical damage by a factor of 10. And I think it's around this level we start seeing jumps from like the usual 5 to 10. And then it is immune to being controlled and is immune to emotion effects as well. It's there to do its job. You are not going to alter it. Its basic attacks are Jaws attack with 17 to hit, 2d10 plus 7 piercing. And then Claw with 17 to hit with 2d8 plus 7 piercing, and it is agile. So pretty straightforward for just like kind of a beast-like creature. Yep. This is the ability where it gets to just jump around you, and it's called angled entry. So it basically can cast Dimension Door at 4th rank, which is its standard rank, so it has to see where it's going. But it can transport as a single action to a space adjacent to a 90-degree angle or more acute. Slight difference there from the actual mythology lore, which was 120 degrees or less. This is 90 degrees or less, it seems. But it has to be an obvious angle of some kind. So, and it's going to be like in a structure or the environment around it. So, for example, it can teleport to a space adjacent to a wall using the angle between the wall and the floor. Or it could be a corner in the room or adjacent to a sizable tree growing straight up out of the ground, but not to like a flat plane or the middle of a room with only, or a room that only has curved corners and edges, basically. So it's got to be quite specific, but there are quite a few options to work with. Once
Not hard
per
to
day.
find an angle in the natural world.
Yeah, it's pretty tough, right? So I understand why they did like the tree growing straight out of the ground kind of thing. It's like there's no way that's a perfect angle, but it's enough to like justify it sort of mechanically. But you can't go with like, well, a blade of grass to come straight out of the ground. Like that's not enough. It's got to be something sort of significant in scale for it to be justified in a sort of more open, unangled space.
Did they also sharpen the angle? In the 1E thing, mythology and folklore is 120 degrees or less. Yeah. Okay, so in Pathfinder lore, it's 90 or less. Okay,
yeah,
so it's got to be,
or at least in 2E,
a right or an acute. Okay,
okay. Once per day, the Hound can use this ability as well to plane shift to or from the dimension of time, with the same restriction on the angles, basically. But the dimension of time is, no insignificant place. The so yeah, that's sort of its ability that gets it around, gets it moving, gets it transporting.
Yeah, and it's not like per day. It's just this is its shit. This is its one trick.
Single action, go attack. Yeah. If it's in the right
fucked.
spot, yeah, it's pretty wild. Now there is a downside to this ability as well when it comes to the angles. Is that obviously it's not always going to be next to this angled thing. So it's not just that it needs this structural angle to teleport to, but it also needs to stay next to it because it is vulnerable to what is called curved space. So this passive ability basically says that if it's not adjacent to a structural angle of 90 degrees or more acute, its physical resistance is suppressed and it becomes second one, which is pretty significant. So suddenly all your damage is going through, especially for all your melee weapons and stuff. And it's got a -1 to nearly everything that matters.
That second is huge.
Yeah. And it cannot remove the second condition unless it is returned to or once again next to adjacent to an appropriate structural angle. So it's like perma if you have it in open space.
Probably wouldn't be as intimidating as this devil hound from the plane of time appeared in the corner and then just started throwing up on your rug. Kind of takes some of the bite out of the horror there.
Exactly. Yeah. At the very least, because it's a permanent condition, well, not against an angle, you're not bothering to spend any checks on retching to like stop the second condition. So maybe you're right. Maybe you're wrong. It also has this passive called Otherworldly Mind, which has the mental trait. And if targeted with an effect that has the mental trait, the target takes 4d6 mental damage with a DC 25 basic will save. Yeah, so
that's fucked for a passive.
It can be pretty brutal if you try to affect its mind, because it is not to be fucked with. And perhaps my favorite, but also bane of my existence, it has what's called Ripping Gaze, an aura, of 30 feet, which is occult and visual, previously evocation, actually, as well. Basically, the Hound's eyes glow balefully, causing bloodless wounds to rip open on the body of any creature that meets its gaze. When you end your turn within the aura, you take 4d6 slashing damage with a DC 25 fortitude save. On a critical success, you are immune for 24 hours. Yeah, you just be taking slashing damage because your body is opening up in bloodless wounds just by being near it. Ooh, I love that.
That's rough.
It's rough, yeah. It is very rough. It does have a couple of appropriate spell casting options as well. Occult, innate,
All right.
DC 21, rank 2, invisibility, self only, good for tracking. Rank 3, haste and slow, both good for time. Rank 4, I actually love this one, dimensional anchor, which stops you from using any teleportation things to get away. I love that. And then rank 8,
anything
also
with the teleportation trait, I think.
Anything with the teleportation trait, that's right. And then rank 8, discern location, which is actually a reasonably powerful spell. And it's just so apt for its ability to track. It's a very well beyond its level, but it's not like powerful beyond flavor. I mean, it basically just means you can find the exact location, including building, community, country, and plane of existence of a particular target. You got to meet a couple of prerequisites, but we can assume that this creature kind of overcomes all of them because of its kind of nature and purpose.
Yeah, GM's the thing to watch out for there is the 10-minute casting time. Discern location is not a combat spell.
There you go. Very, very good call.
Awesome spell, and I love it so much, and every party should have it.
If you're doing a plane hopping adventure, oh yeah.
not a combat spell.
Yep.
Yeah.
Really, really cool. So simple list, powerful options in a way. You know as well as anyone how brutal slow can be. And
just
haste,
a
of
point
course,
of order.
is a go-to.
In the remaster, discern location is called pinpoint.
Oh, is it? Okay, good call.
Thanks,
good
Archives.
Call. Thanks, Archives of Nethys. Loved it. As of this recording, finally updated. We'll have Monster Core updated soon on there. So we're coming pretty close to having a pretty straight line on remaster content in these episodes.
Slowly happening.
Slowly.
But yeah,
that's the stat block.
Sucks. Slow fucking sucks. I hate all of these spells as a player. There's not a single spell on this list that I'm like, whatever.
You don't like any of them?
No, I not when they're playing against me. This is the exact spell list I never want to fight.
Yeah. Oh no, I see what you're saying. Yeah. It's it could be real dangerous. And I have some thoughts on that, but I'm gonna keep them for kind of the latter portion of our episode here. What do you say we hop into Homebrew and talk about your thoughts on the stat block as a whole?
Did you lean into that?
I did.
For a reason?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. No, not for a reason. Just did it. That's what I'm a boot. Okay.
I just know that's how you say it. I don't have a problem with it. I'm here for when the East Coast comes out. Watching Strange Brew over there in your spare time.
Yeah, what do you think? What do you think generally and across the board? So, like, minor spoilers. This is one of those creatures we've actually used recently, or we're up against recently. So I know you have some thoughts, but just give me your cursory, kind of surface thoughts on the structure of this stat block.
It's complicated. This is not an easy stat block at a glance to absorb and to decide how you would run.
Mm-hmm.
This is one of those combats that involves a lot more preparation than I think I would want to do. Like I would read this stat block and just be like, all right, this sounds awesome. This is exactly my kind of creature. It's an Eldritch horror. It does Nightcrawler shit. It wants to drink souls. It plays with time and nature and space and all these concepts that I've really grown to appreciate. But reading some of these passives, 90 degrees or more acute in the structural environment, that is very easy to do, but you need to plan your attack as a GM, because if this thing gets kited out into a larger room, you all of a sudden need to be aware of, the sicken condition, it losing its mental, poison, physical, a lot of things that we would traditionally lean on we would traditionally lean on VTTs for.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think Foundry has a module for Hounds of Tindalos when they're more than 5 feet away from
definitely
the corner.
don't. Definitely. And to make that even further, it's not all of the resistances is just the physical one that's removed. So it's like it would be easier to like remove all of them probably, but it's not that. It's like this one in particular.
Yeah, so it gets even more complicated. And I'm not opposed to it. I just this is the kind of creature that I would jump to run and then start running it and realize I had fucked up every single bit of it because I didn't fully read the stat block. I was just excited by its abilities. I was excited by its weaknesses. Like, it looks on paper perfectly beatable. Like, looks, as a player, I'm not afraid of it. The spell list is a lot, and that's kind of a heavy hit if you're playing more than one of these. Haste yourself, haste others, slow, dimensional anchor, like all that stuff gets really, really dicey, especially when you start a combat invisible, which I don't see why you wouldn't.
Yeah, could easily do.
So I see a lot here that looks like a fun toy to play with. Just underneath that cool shiny exterior is just a bunch of little tiny razor blades that I feel like are going to cut me if I try and run it without preparation.
Right. Yeah. The thing about this creature is it is so one of its main shticks is strongly and heavily dependent on its environment. So the map you're using or the environment you're facing this in is very, very important. Because if it doesn't have options to use its angled entry, probably even once a round, if not once every second round or so, then you're probably doing it wrong. It needs to bounce around in a way to like create an unnerving sort of tension to the whole situation. But it also needs room to cast spells that do take 2 actions in order for it to have its full efficacy. So you do need some flexibility in your environment for it to be properly used.
Yeah. And like you pointed out during the stat block, these aren't mindless. This is a 6 intelligence and a 4 wisdom. This is smarter and wiser than a basic human being will ever be.
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
Int is 0. High intelligence is 1. Guys like Musk and Einstein, they'd be sitting at a 2, maybe a 3. This thing is a 6 with a 4 wisdom. So it's not going to enter a room without corners like that. Like it will know these things because first of all, it physically cannot enter rooms like that, but it's going to know that it cannot move more than 5 feet away from a 90-degree corner. So you got to play it like that. I guess you don't have to. You could play a nerfed intelligence version if you wanted to play a lower one, but I feel like normally you get to pick as a GM whether or not you're going to prep the environment and do like really fun environmentally heavy stuff for the combat, or you can pick a really complicated creature. And in this, you don't have that separation. It really is both. You have to be very aware of your environment and very, very attuned to what you're running, I would imagine. I mean, you can speak to that better than I could.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's, most of my experience is running with maps that are already pre-built, so and with encounters like pre-selected, and you make some adjustments along the way, and you realize that you didn't have to stay in the room the whole time in retrospect sometimes and all that. But generally speaking, should I be trying to find a way to create my own custom sort of encounter, I generally start with the map and then build around that. I might have an idea of what types of creatures I want to use to start, but I have to find the map first and then see if those creatures fit the map. And if they don't, sometimes I change the map, sometimes I change the creature. It really, really depends. Depends on how heavy I am on the theme. If we talk about, say, it's been a while now, but like if we talk about, say, one of the custom events I did for Stemming the Tide with the full moon, I had a very strong canine theme, we'll call it, across the board. And so I was dead set on canine creatures for all the encounters. But I had a variety of maps and stuff, and they tend to fit pretty well. One of them was like the yes hand that moves at the diagonal angles only through the air. They came down from the roof, easy enough to work with. The hellhounds were a threat in the library because books, easy enough to, so, but I did start with the maps and decide, okay, I need dogs. What are the dogs? Which ones go where? That sort of thing. I can say that because I've used this creature, I chose the creature first in this case. And it was, I think it was an interesting choice. I think it was a really fun choice. And I really enjoyed running it. But I do have some, not regrets, but I think I gathered some insight of what I would do differently the next time, or should I have used them a second time. But yeah, if unless you have more to throw on, we might get into spoiler territory, which we have a new splash screen for, if you want to feature it.
Or yeah, just 1 second. There's this concept I've been playing with in my brain since we started talking about this, and we were talking about the angles and the round rooms. And I've been trying to slowly on the side figure out when like watches and clocks were kind of first mass marketed.
Mm-hmm.
Because I wonder if this creature is a direct result of what we would know as like either an electric clock or like a quartz clock, like
right.
a modern chronometer.
Mm-hmm.
Because if this thing can't function in the rounds, but it can only function in the angles, there's something in my mind. There's some thread there that I just can't find where the hands are the angles, and it can move through time because the hands move around the watch, but it can't actually escape the watch because of the round nature of it or clock. There's this thread has just been pulling at the back of my brain.
Yeah, okay.
I can't make heads or tails of it, but I like that tangentially related bullshit. I was an Alan Alfred fan in high school. Like I kind of like that. Yeah. Cause I love the idea of like, especially if you go for like the 120 degrees or less kind of angle, and you're looking at the two different hands on the clock, and it's almost as if there's only a short amount of time in which they can't come at you, because once it goes beyond the 120, it eventually quickly comes back to a different 120. But there's that in-between zone where they can't quite get to you. I love that idea. That's a really fun concept. Now that you said it, I can't quite pin it down when it comes to the clock and the watch and everything. Where is it? But, does it need to be anywhere? I think there's something
Lovecraft,
there.
Baby.
the use of round and sharp angles. I think it was maybe not inspired by, but, there's definitely something there, I think.
Yeah.
All right. Spoilers.
Okay, spoilers me. Let's talk about that time I used one of these against you.
If you're still listening, just to let you know that this is going to be till the end of the episode. So if you don't want to hear spoilers for Stemming the Tide, episode 100, dip out now, come back after you've watched it. But from here on out, it's all spoiler territory. You have been warned.
You've been warned. Spoilers go. Episode 100, part 1. First creature you encountered. Oh, it was awesome. I don't know about you, but I was awesome. I loved it.
I fucking hate these things. I hate everything about them.
It was the start of a shocking moment that you didn't quite get till to the end of the episode. But I really played up that coming out of a smoke in the corner thing. And that thing jumped all around. And if I recall correctly, no one managed to succeed a recall knowledge check if even one or two were even attempted.
They were definitely attempted, but nobody succeeded. I think
definitely no one succeeded.
Attempted one.
Yeah. I think the beauty
sucks. This felt like a no-win scenario.
It was
facing
rough.
the Hound of Tindalos really felt like our Kobayashi Maru.
Mm-hmm. It was a really tough battle. Everywhere it was tearing bloodless wounds out of somebody. It was probably one of the best or funniest and worst examples of me failing at an aura miserably as a GM. It was real shameful.
I didn't even think about that.
up to it, including me remembering the critical success part and being proud of myself, and then completely forgetting that someone actually had critically succeeded, and just kicking myself. But yeah, that thing jumped around. So that basically in the Rod and Bow Club, you're in this tight area of rooms and hallways, and it had every opportunity to just move where it wanted to, and there was nothing you could do about it. So every time you got into position, it was out of position. Every time it hit someone you didn't want it to, or someone was running away because they were avoiding it, it just came straight back towards you. I remember it being so ridiculous. Like every time someone moved to a certain spot, I was like, I can just go there. I was thinking as a GM, I was like, they have no idea. I'm just going to be next to them now. And
I thought we were going to
there was
Decade in episode 1 of our adventure.
It was crazy, and not to mention the physical resistance, which I think I forgot about it until we were using the Foundry automation, and it was like apply damage. Oh shit! Like minus 10 from that. Oh, here we go. Kind of shit. And here you get like a rogue in the trying to get precision damage in, can't, because you can't get it flanked. Like it was all over the place. It was really fun from my end.
That's good.
Very
I'm
worrisome from the PCs.
Yeah, it was. These things will stick out in my mind as some of the toughest creatures I have ever fought as a player.
Mm-hmm. The thing is that I didn't forget so much as I didn't end up using a couple of things. Part of the purpose of choosing that creature at the beginning is I knew it was going to be a tougher fight. By the way, I forgot to mention this earlier, but this is a rare creature. So it's not that it's more powerful because it's rare, but it's something that just doesn't crop up for no reason kind of thing.
Okay.
So it was a very purposeful choice to have this creature for the story I was telling. And I knew it was going to be a tough first battle. I wanted the tension to be there. But I also, in retrospect, realized that this creature is actually probably better when there's multiple against a higher level party. So this is a level 7 creature, but you were level 6 PCs, if I recall correctly. And the fact that it was 1 versus 4-ish of you meant that a lot of spellcasting was out of the options. Not that I couldn't have done it. I could have cast haste. I could have cast slow, one or the other, maybe both at some point. It would have prolonged the fight quite a bit. And it didn't feel super necessary to do. I think because of the intelligence of the creature, it's just something I kind of gloss over sometimes, just double checking the stats for how they might fight. I think in retrospect, I would have gone on my way to do it a little bit more. I would have at least cast haste, I think.
That's fair. I mean, you did establish your dominance in that combat pretty
quickly. Yeah.
So I don't think an extra action was strictly necessary.
You're not wrong. But that action would have been interesting because that action is to stride or strike. And it would be interesting to have like an angled entry teleport, an attack, and then a run across the room to the appropriate spot and another attack. And that would be your 4 actions. And that would have been the extra thing I would have loved to do, because not only would it have been more powerful, but it would have made everyone go, so which one does it do to move normally? Not to mention the fact that I never made it fly. It just ran around. Actually, I don't think it ran around at all. I think it just teleported. So no one knew that it could fly or even run. It was there was a lot of mystery around that creature. And
I mean, fly was news to me until we sat down to do this.
Right. It did not go out of its way to do those things because it didn't need to, in a way, and I think that was one of those cool moments about part of my preparation and choice of where this encounter would first set off the episode 100 series was consciously thinking the Rod and Bow Club's perfect because if they succeed to recall knowledge, they might all just run onto the beach, and then it's at a huge disadvantage. But you didn't. So you didn't, and it didn't, and it wasn't.
Yep.
It was kind of amazing, and there was no retreating despite how harrowing the situation was. Had you even chose to retreat, you would have put yourself in an advantage. You wouldn't have known it. That's what I think is really cool.
We decided to fight in a 5-foot hallway.
It was something else. It was really good. Yeah.
Fucking geniuses.
I just love that you just don't know it, like that misunderstanding, or like there's no way to even know that the environment is working against you. Like, how crazy is that? You know when difficult terrain is working against you. You know when the weather is working against you. You know these things. But in this case, you did not know your environment was a bad place to be in. And it was fucking your day up. It's amazing. It's a really cool thing.
Got to hit those recall knowledges, or
Yeah.
at least, throw a couple of tries in the ring, even if you fail the first one or two.
Yeah.
We
The first one or
probably
two,
should have
when you
done
fail the
that
first
way.
one or two, everyone just gives up and goes, it's a waste of action economy now. But sometimes it really is. Sometimes you got to persevere, because
Yeah.
it can make all the difference.
And it absolutely would have in this combat.
Mhm.
Like, just knowing, hey, maybe don't do what you're doing where you're doing it.
Yeah, seriously. Not to mention, like, don't underestimate things like avert gaze for like these auras. It is a rippling gaze. It is a visual effect. I can't remember if I'm pretty sure I would have brought it up. I think some
Arthur
people
did
used
avert
it.
his gaze.
Yeah,
at
I think
one
he did.
point.
Which
So
can just give you a
love
bonus, which isn't much.
I love when actions like that come in handy.
You could also just shut your eyes and go blind and not have to do the save, but you are blind now, right? So you have to weigh the pros and cons of those things.
Flat checks versus flat damage.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, I just remember it was a really fun fight for me, and these were really fun creatures to keep in the periphery of the whole episode 100 adventure. And I purposely chose this creature to cover after episode 100 is done. This will launch shortly after it's finished, so that the listeners of that series can have a listen back on what the creature was exactly, because I don't think it ever properly came up in the show, because we never acknowledged it. But it was really fun.
I know Cam knew what it was, but
Cam
I
knew.
don't know if
Cam
it
had
said
it.
on there. Yeah.
Speaking of which, I remember Cam actually also calling me out, saying, I don't think you can teleport there. And I had to specify it's in the parentheses in that ability is like using the angle of a wall and a floor also counts, not just the outer corner of a wall. Yeah.
It's been like 4 months since we recorded that, but I do actually remember that.
Yeah, I was like, there's something here. I know there is. Yeah, I remember reading it.
Yeah.
And they conceded pretty quickly, but it was a cool thing, because I was thinking the same thing when I was first reading the stat block. Was like, I can just go to the corners of a room and you read a little bit deeper. And you're like, oh no, it's got some leeway here. It's great.
Yeah, that's a far too much leeway for me.
He says as a player,
corners, no more of this vertical corner garbage.
Yeah, but yeah, they were a fun creature that set a precedent, I think, for that whole adventure that I really loved. It was a really tough thing to write that section of story, because my brain was so wrapped around doing the stupid thing of running something around time and time bending. Like, don't do that to yourself. It's such a pain in the ass, especially if you're like obsessed with continuity, which I can be most of the time.
Oh, yeah. You and wibbly wobbly time shenanigans do not get along.
I did with wibbly wobbly time shenanigans. There's a whole rant I have somewhere in Discord to Cam, not just because I needed Cam to know, but it was like, I need to write this down, or otherwise I will never remember my own continuity. That may never go out to the public, but there is continuity to like why and how the hounds were there and then were not, and who they targeted. It was like, I was obsessed with making it a thing. You don't have to be, listeners and GMs. You don't hurt yourself.
Yeah,
but at least
I just saw Madam Web, and apparently story's optional.
All I saw was
movie.
a quick little clip of like the worst lines of the script, and it was like, oh, this is bad. Like,
No, I mean, they're
bad.
all the worst lines. None of that movie makes any sense.
Oh, so funny
whatsoever. Nothing, not a single thing makes any sense. It's
just,
I mean, it's not a bad movie. It is absolutely a movie, but that's the only compliment it's gonna get from me.
just like our episode title, I think of part 5 or 6. You have been.
Yeah, that's part 6. I just rendered that one today.
So fucking funny.
Again, spoilers for part 6, but I was listening back to that as I was doing the body edit. That was savage. Harper's just lit that woman up for no reason.
To be fair, I went on a really offensive French person rant.
That's fair.
It was well deserved. It still cracks me up. I've been telling people about it. They don't even get it. I'm like, so you're not going to understand the context, but I did this thing, and it's killing me to this day. It was so funny. That'll go down in history, or at least our history.
Yeah.
Oh, so good. But yeah, anyway, these creatures I think are really cool. I was really stoked to use them. I did love going down the time bendy train, no matter how much it hurt my brain. And I did particularly target things. We're in the spoiler section, so like obviously Raphael was targeted and killed by one of these because he followed the trail of people who messed with time, and he ended up messing with time with himself. And I had to actually justify. If you remember correctly, you were following Raphael's trail, and Raphael was following the trail of the detectives who were centuries before his time. And in the middle of it all, I had this hidden middle trail of Belcora herself traveling the same path, and I had to justify along the way in my head in the canon as to why Belcora was not targeted by the hounds. And I realized that I can't. She was targeted. However, the targeting was a little bit more related to Shafrim and Yason Kalir, who were members of her retinue. And it was Shafrim's connection to the dimension of time and dreams that I had created via that amazing map by Chayampeku that had him have a loophole in avoiding them. Basically, it was something along those lines, and ultimately they knew to not bother targeting him because they knew he would die anyway because of what happens along the way. So like you saw in Kalir ends up being killed by Shafrim, and Shafrim ends up dying through his own mummification ritual, and all of those little itty bitty bits of detail were interspersed into the story and how I told it, and the direction and order of operations that I told it. And the whole way I was thinking, when and how are these hounds able to come after these people, and when and how can I justify them stopping? And it is upon these certain moments of death and these certain moments of renewal and stuff like that, and what I've also run with as well is with Raphael was killed by a Hound of Tindalos. And
careful, we're starting to leave episode 100 spoiler territory.
Yeah, and then those hounds were now dogging the cast of episode 100. How episode 100 ends. There's a lot of up in the air, even with the epilogue of what the result of those lives are, of the lives of that whole story. And we are still exploring in ways of who may or may not be a target of them. That's where I'll leave that, because you're right. We're treading into difficult, delicate territory still, even for the timing. But that is still in the air as of this episode. So much went into that thought process, but it is still in the periphery, in the background of who may or may not, whose circumstance may or may not be the target of these hounds.
I always appreciate that about you. You've always got a reason why things happen.
Yeah.
I need that because that's how my brain works. So I appreciate that you always have that in the background.
Yeah.
You did not need to come up with a reason for Belcora not doing it. She's the big bad. That could be the reason itself.
Yeah.
But I get the need for completion, and I really do appreciate that. So stuff like that, even if I don't know about it, will be appreciated by me, even if it goes unnoticed. So,
well, I appreciate your appreciation.
Cast as well.
Yeah, because I need it too. Otherwise, I might not sleep at night. It is my compulsion to have those things wrapped around my my brain in some capacity. So,
Do you remember the show Undergrads?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
Okay. So it is this painfully Canadian animated show. I think it was
Yeah.
written and animated in Toronto. But one of the guys is a movie buff, and the way they establish his bona fides is a movie buff. No, it's one of the other guys.
Oh, is it? Okay.
It's when Nitz goes out and gets new friends.
Okay.
And there's that he just laughs. He has one response, and he's full of shit.
Okay.
And it's the guy full of shit, and they're watching a movie, and he's like, "Wait, watch!" And it's like a facsimile of Thin Red Line. It might be Thick Blue Line or some garbage.
Sure,
like
yeah.
that. But he points at the screen. And he's like, "See it? His wristwatch is in that scene." And then he goes, "And see it? No wristwatch. Continuity error. Number one." And he like yells it in the movie theater, and I've never felt so seen in my life.
That's so good. Oh, I catch that shit all the time, and it does drive me crazy. I remember the very first time I ever heard about someone catching that. It wasn't me. It was like my friend's dad. My buddy Mitch was telling me, he's like, Kenny's dad ruins every movie he watches. He just finds shit that you can't ignore after a while. And it was Batman Begins by Christopher Nolan. And apparently there's just one shot in the beginning where it's snowing out in like where the monastery is, and then the next shot and shows like this big shot, and then Kenny's dad's just like, "There's no snow on that roof." You're like, "Oh God, no! I can't stop looking at the roof."
Yeah,
it's so redundant, but there it is.
Yeah, I think we're done.
All right, let's call the episode.
Yeah, this part may or may not make it out. If it doesn't, there is a jump cut there, and good luck. I don't know why we would need to release me just shitting on Madam Web. But let's see how lazy I am when I'm editing this.
Yeah.
If you like the show and you want to help us make it, you can do that at patreon.com/unchartednorth. For a few bucks a month, you can really help us out. And all of your money directly goes to making these shows. We do not turn a profit. We don't take any of this home. Everything gets dumped back in, whether it's for those sweet maps that Freeman was talking about, or for some of the music, like our intro and outro for this program, or all of our other shows. And for $5 a month, you'll get a handwritten thank you letter and some themed goodies in the mail. $10 a month, you can suggest a creature and get a discount code for our merch store. If maybe you want to see us cover another Lovecraftian creature. I don't know if the King in Yellow is a being in Pathfinder, but I don't even know if that's Lovecraftian now that I'm thinking about it. But you can throw us that way, or maybe you want to see us cover the King in Yellow in Delta Green. We'll cover any system, any creature. I'll learn. I don't give a shit. I actually find it. We did a 13th Age one once, and that was a lot of fun. And I love the idea of dipping into other systems and doing other creatures. So if you want us to cover your Wookiee from whatever that Fantasy Flight Star Wars game was, Scoundrels of the Galaxy or something.
Yeah.
No shade on that game. That game looks like a lot of fun, and I really do want to play it. But you can do that. If you want to get some cool merch with Critty on it or the compass, you can see in Freeman's screen over there. You can find that at unchartednorth.com/shop. If you're on YouTube, our socials have been scrolling around below us, as well as in the description below, and on the audio platform. There are links to all that stuff there. Uncharted No, if you want to hit our Instagram, as well as just about everything else. If you want to get quick access to that fantasy, what was the name of that show?
Imaginary Worlds. Wait,
Imaginary Worlds. If you want to get quick access to that Imaginary Worlds show, as well as the original Hound of Tindalos story, you can do so over at encounterthis.ca. That's our show notes, our reading list, all that good stuff. If you're an audio listener and you want to look at our hirsute faces while we're telling you this information, you can do so at youtube.com/@encounterpod. If you could rate and review on your platform of choice, that would really help us out. If you're on YouTube, hit the like button. If you liked it, hit the thumbs down. If you didn't, they both help us create content in a direction that you guys are interested in. If you want to be notified when new episodes come out, hit that bell. We do have a complete playlist of all of our 5e creatures, all of our 2e creatures, and all of our all creatures over on the YouTube, so you can check those out. They were working on the backlog. It is a thing that's happening, but it is happening very, very slowly. So maybe in the next year, we'll hopefully have all the Encounter This episodes up there. But thank you so much for listening, putting up with our shit for yet another episode, and we will be back in 2 weeks with whatever comes next. I was going to spoil it, but I don't know how to spoil it without just saying the creature's name, so I'm not going to do that.
It's okay. I'll end it with letting you know that the King in Yellow is indeed in Pathfinder. In fact, Hastur, the King in Yellow, is an outer god.
Okay, so I mean, $10 a month, we'll cover an outer god. As long as the guy's stat block, we'll do it. Crazy like that.
Let's go.
All right. Thank you, listeners.
Thanks, everyone.
And we will see you again very soon.
Stay curvy.
Until next time, creatures, thanks, as always, for listening to Encounter This.